Welcome. I'm Michael Owens. I'm the executive producer of RetailSpaces, and welcome to the most recent installment of the Rollout by RetailSpaces. We have a really strong panel lined up for you today and a really timely topic. We want to talk about planning your retail operations for 2021 and beyond. Now, as we all know, consumer spending accounts for 70% of economic activity, GDP. But given how much consumers are modifying their behavior right now, will that still remain true in the future? So today we've organized a panel of guests. We're going to explore consumer spending, real estate finance, and of course the impact on facilities management. We're going to be joined by Tom McGee, President and CEO of ICSC, Matt Boss, he's the EVP of Consumer Products for TD Bank, and Rob Allman, CEO of Nest, the leading integrated facilities management company. Now we're going to structure this conversation. We're going to bring each one on individually at the start just to talk about some of the insights and thoughts going into the holiday season and of course into the start of next year. And then we're going to have a group discussion on that, but also looking to the future. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the screen, hopefully this works, Tom McGee, President and CEO of ICSC, the International Council of Shopping Centers. There we go, Tom. And I'm going to take full responsibility. I forgot to unmute myself there, so it wasn't any technical things, but that's the world we're living in these days.
We are living in a virtual world and a unique world for sure. So first and foremost, thanks for having me on, and welcome to everyone, and good afternoon to everyone, or good morning, depending upon where you are in the U.S. ICSC is forecasting what I'll call a solid holiday season. Our forecast is for 1.9% growth year over year. Clearly, a big part of that growth will come from e-commerce. We expect the continuation of growth from e-commerce and online shopping to happen over this holiday season. And despite obviously a very uncertain economic environment and a challenging economic environment, part of our expectation for growth over this holiday season has a lot to do with the fact that people have spent a lot less on other things over the course of the last number of months. And so we do see in our survey results and the conversations we have with different constituencies an expectation for people to lean into the holiday season and really looked at that as an opportunity to bring some joy in an otherwise pretty difficult time period. This holiday season will be longer than other holiday seasons for a variety of reasons. I think first and foremost, retailers are encouraging shoppers to get out earlier and to shop earlier and spread out their shopping over a longer period of time. And as a result, some of the days that we look to as important days in the holiday season, although still important and still symbolic, will not have the same level of prominence and importance that they've had in the past. Things like Black Friday and the holiday and the Thanksgiving weekend and Super Saturday will still be important, but won't have the same percentage of sales they have in the past. One of the reasons the holiday season will be longer is, as I mentioned, retailers will encourage that. I think there'll be logistical challenges with more online shopping. Things like shipping and so forth. It's important to spread that out over a longer period of time to allow consumers to get their products in time. And I think what you'll see as a result of that is the continuation of the trends that have accelerated over the course of the last number of months during the pandemic, really the convergence of the online and the physical world. Retailers utilizing their store network as a way to not only welcome people into the store, which is obviously at a different level than it has been in the past, but also to use stores as a fulfillment center as well. And people may, in fact, buy things online, but go to the store and pick it up, whether that's the classic click and collect or what's clearly become, really important over this last number of months. And is a trend that's here to stay, curbside pickup. And so, again, we see a solid holiday season. There are risks to that. Clearly, the increase that all of us are concerned about in the virus and the cases spiking could clearly have an impact upon consumer sentiment. And we're starting to see signs that it is in our most recent survey around confidence and concerns. And clearly that could have some impact around people's shopping behavior and the continued events in Washington, D.C., and particularly the lack of stimulus and the impact that can have upon confidence people have in the economy going into 2021. So there are some risks, but as I sit here today, we are expecting some growth year over year of around 1.9%. So I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tom. Thanks for giving those insights. So now we're going to welcome Matt Boss. Matt is the EVP of Consumer Products for TD Bank. Tom, of course, didn't need much of an introduction to everyone in this group, but Matt, before you kind of give us a little bit of insights on where you're seeing consumer spending, can you share with the audience a little bit of background on yourself and your role specifically within TD? I know that you guys obviously partner and do work with Nordstrom and the likes of Target with the credit card products, but if you could share just some insights on your role.
Yeah, sure, happy to. And like Tom, thanks for having me, and thanks for all that are attending today. So my role as the head of consumer products is to look after the different businesses that we offer on the consumer side to our TD Bank customers and partners. So it includes things like mortgage, home equity, checking, savings accounts, credit card accounts. But probably what might be also interesting for this forum is we also do a lot of partnering on a business-to-business aspect with retailers. You named Target and Nordstrom, which are some of the key brand names. But we also have partnerships with people like Ethan Allen, Raymore Flanigan, Samsung, Icon Fitness, or better known as probably NordicTrack or Proform, just to name a few, as well as some lawn and garden spaces. So, really cover a lot of the consumers out there, have both an East Coast but also national view of what's happening, and then specific retailers, whether you're talking about Nordstrom in the clothing and higher end space, or Target, which clearly has had a good run since the pandemic started.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And last but not least, welcome to the screen, Rob Allman. Rob is the CEO of Nest. Rob, how's it going?
It's going real well. Thanks for taking yourself off mute.
There we go. Hey, it's always good. People are always hopping from one Zoom to the next, and maybe it has to be stalled a little bit to get people they didn't miss anything. So Rob, hearing what Matt and Tom just shared there, you sit in an interesting spot working with a lot of retailers. And for the audience that's tuning in that first is not familiar with Nest, of course, I'd like you to share who Nest is and what you guys do, but then some of the insights on where you see opportunities right now for retailers.
Sure, and thanks for having me, and thanks to the audience for attending. Nest is on its 26th year of managing retail facilities across the United States and Canada. Right now, we're touching about 60,000 locations over a calendar year, and that's everything from reactive maintenance, so think of HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and preventative maintenance, right? So janitorial, floor care, etc. So you can imagine what happened to us back in March, right? 90% of our clients went dark within 72 hours. Pretty concerning, and thankfully the stimulus came through to help us out through that. But we took those, call it 4 to 6 weeks, to really get lean, get tight, and build consultative solutions for our customers as they got out of this pandemic. What we saw in, call it middle of May, is when the doors began to reopen, our customers were thrilled because people wanted to get back and shop. They saw increases in sales that they didn't expect, and that made us feel good knowing that once people felt safe, they were going to walk back into the stores. Now that has kind of had its leaps and bounds throughout the year because of the things that Tom brought up, especially right now with the spikes. But our real goal through the last 8 months, call it, is to get the message out there that at least our brands that we partner with, and we've got some great names on our portfolio, they are doing all they can to make sure that the sites are safe, secure, sanitized for the consumer to go in there. And to think what we have to deal with now, just a week and a half away roughly of the holiday season. Tom did say it. It's going to be a longer holiday season. Black Friday is going to look different. E-com is going to be a big thing. But our customers are telling us they're seeing more foot traffic than they expected, which tells us that people want to get out and shop. Now it's our responsibility at Nest to make sure that our customers are making sure they're doing the right things and we're providing the right level of services to those folks so that the consumer feels good about walking back into the store. We're seeing a lot of progress. I think the challenge that we have now is to predict the future. It's hard to predict tomorrow right now. Going out in 2021 with everything from Black Friday, the spikes, we've seen some jurisdictions actually go back on some of the closures. Philadelphia yesterday, right across the bridge from us. has done some things with restaurants and shopping as well. They're the things we can't necessarily control. That's why it's so important for us to make sure we're doing different things to continue to drive sales through a variety of different channels.
Thank you, Rob. So I want to take it back to the group now, but I do have a specific question to go back to Matt to ask, and it's on that topic with the, thinking about consumer confidence and where things are. You're saying we can't predict things, but I mean, signs are showing that there is, with the virus surging and potential lockdowns coming around, how do we figure out the consumer confidence? Do you have any insights into that? Like, if, on one side, we read reports saying that consumers are sitting on trillions of dollars of money that hasn't been spent, and that we could see a real big boom in retail. But then on the flip side of that, we see the news where, 6,000 people are sitting in line in Dallas over the weekend to get food. I don't know if you have insights, to kind of share, but, how do we, when we look to 2021, overall, is it confident, or is it still some uncertainty there?
Well, I think Rob probably said it best, that predicting 2021 is tough given how much trouble we're all having predicting tomorrow. So I'll agree with Rob thoroughly on that. I guess maybe some facts that probably lead to at least the hope of optimism is one, and this was touched on in Tom's opening around the stimulus. Customers or consumers are sitting on billions, if not trillions of dollars, kind of since March. If you look at the total deposits between consumers and small business, you'd estimate they're up somewhere between $1.5 to $2 trillion. And most of that is actually still there. Some customers have burnt through the stimulus, but you are seeing record level deposits at all financial institutions across the country. And you are seeing, higher balances in many segments of customers. So there is definitely money to be spent. And then if you kind of unpack that and look at where customers are spending, not overly insightful to this group, but things like travel continue to do very, very poorly. But retail, home furnishing, toys, those types of things are doing exceptionally well. And that trend has continued. I think the theme of online versus physical stores came up. The year-over-year growth in online or digital spend is quite staggering, and that has maintained really from March all the way throughout. But you are seeing some of that physical spend start to come back. So I do think there's reasons for optimism, and you are seeing that liquidity in the marketplace. But I do think the lockdowns will start to be interesting, what impacts those have, as well as I just think 6, 7, 8 months of this and the stress that certain customers are having, and there are some signs that some stress is out there. But overall, I'd agree with Tom's opening that I think there is reason to be optimistic. And particularly with some of the positive news around the vaccination, but I know as much as others do around that topic.
Sure. So I guess, throwing it over to Tom then, we asked for people, of course, to fill out the poll. And if you've not done this, how prepared is your organization for potential second wave of closures? And ranked from 1 to 5, 40% of the audience said that they're very prepared, and 33% said 4. So so it's strong. So that's a good thing. But from your membership, with all the uncertainty and this, how to plan ahead, to make smart decisions, make better informed decisions. How are you, is ICSC, providing insights and guiding the membership base?
Well, I think, first and foremost, I think that, what we're living through, is a once in a 100-year type event. That was the last time we had a pandemic in this country, and a lot's changed over that 100 years. So, managing through this type of crisis is nothing that I think any of us, were, planned to ever be in this situation. And I think you kind of throw the books out and you're kind of in a crisis management situation. So I think you're constantly looking at what the facts and circumstances are on the ground. From a retailer standpoint, you are clearly trying to focus on ways that you can utilize, your online channels and your physical channels effectively together. I would say, and certainly from a developer and an owner's perspective, you're leaning in and working with your tenants to try to help them stay in business and to do all that they can to make sure that they, stay open. If you take a step back and you think about everything that this, our country's been through, and certainly the retail industry's been through, you can't help but be amazed at how innovative and entrepreneurial, this industry has been. If you would have said, you closed your eyes and said we were going to fundamentally shut down the U.S. economy for a period of time, which is kind of what happened, other than essential retail. And fast forward over 8 months and said, yes, there are some business failures that have happened, but there's an awful lot of companies that have hung in there, most that have hung in there, and have been able to figure out a way to serve their customers and serve their communities. And they're doing it in completely new and innovative ways. And what's old is new in some ways. Home delivery has come back into vogue almost for every type of retail, but certainly for the food and beverage industry, the restaurant industry, which has gone through so much. And these small restaurateurs have figured out a way to be innovative and stay in business and try to serve their customer base. So I think the only thing you can be in this situation is flexible. You got to put your innovative hat on and be entrepreneurial, and you got to look at the facts as they are at that point in time and know that circumstances are going to change pretty quickly, because you can't control the virus. The virus is ultimately, was dictating a lot of the business decisions that are taking place right now. But when I take a step back, I think we should be very proud of the way the industry as a whole has, managed its way through this. And quite frankly, American businesses managed its way through a really, really difficult situation. And I agree with Matt. There is a lot of liquidity out there. Obviously, a lot of liquidity provided by the Fed, but individuals have a lot of liquidity as well. And I hope, we don't know, but I hope when we get past the pandemic that, given the amount of liquidity that's there, the kind of the pent-up demand that's there, that we may end up in a pretty robust situation once we truly get past the pandemic and we get to a point where we're back to normalcy. But today it's all about flexibility and innovation, and really being focusing on what the circumstances are where you're at that point in time.
Definitely agree. So, our audience here at RetailSpaces are primarily heads of store development, design, construction, and a number of facilities leaders. And we've been running roundtables for the last few weeks, and essentially we've had a front row seat to kind of hear what a lot of their challenges are. And across the board, it's how do we make sense of all this uncertainty? How do we plan accordingly? But the number one challenge, and we even asked this for folks that signed up for today, is what is your biggest thing, and what are you doing for your plans for facilities into 2021? And it's figuring out how to cut costs and how to operate leaner and with less personnel. I think that's something I'd love to hear from you, Rob. I mean, you guys sit in that world with helping retailers, specifically with facilities management, how to operate and lead their facility strategy. What are you, suggesting to retailers now and helping retail customers in that area? And why is it so important? We know the facilities. Obviously. It's no surprise that we had a pre-call before this, so we did discuss some of these things. But you said it right, that facilities, and I took a little offense because I have a redheaded daughter, but you said facilities have been the redheaded stepchild for a little while. But but it's joking aside, facilities management is so key. So can you share with the audience kind of your thoughts and why it is?
Well, yeah, and now it's more important than ever. Again, it was always looked at as a unnecessary expense, right? Facilities management, what does that mean even? But now we're critical to making sure that the consumer feels good to walking into the store. Not just the consumer, but the employees as well. The folks that are working in these sites every day, they want to see the stores being sanitized. What is my employer doing to make me feel safe as I work at a checkout for 10, 12 hours a day? And you're right. Look, no matter how well the holiday is for you, from a sales perspective, we get calls every year in January on cutbacks. We need to cut back for the first few months because of whatever reason. The challenge you're going to have there is typically two of the first things that get cut out are janitorial services and HVAC preventative maintenance. Well, right now, those two things are more important than ever as we continue to muscle through this pandemic. So what else can we do to provide those savings? What we've done is back in early March, after we kind of had to identify how we were going to operate remotely, and by the way, we have not been back in the office since March 18th, is provide not just what they saved while they were shut down, because believe it, there was plenty of savings there, what we can save them in the foreseeable future for non-essential repairs, deferred maintenance. Now, there's good with that and there's bad. You've got to be very careful. Stores that were closed for 6 to 8 weeks called us up, and I mean, we saw some crazy stories. One of which that stands out, a customer had a store in Pittsburgh where they hadn't been there in over a month. They come to find out the rooftop had blown off the roof during a tornado. They didn't know what was going on with those sites. So the dark store management thing was a big thing. So we had to do those types of repairs as well. But back to the deferred maintenance program, stores are going to call in and ask for anything they can. A good approach would be, look, we're going to look at all those repairs, but then evaluate the locations, how they're performing. I'm sure Tom can agree. There's definitely been discussions of underperforming stores being closed more rapidly if the landlord is willing to negotiate. Watching those kind of repairs very closely, and of course, making sure the overperforming locations get the TLC they need so that they don't jeopardize the image of those particular locations. And from a supplier seat, we're ready, right? We've already gotten some calls from procurement. What can you do to compress costs? We're going to help you, but we've also compressed costs more than once for a number of our clients. I know other suppliers can speak to that same tune. So you got to be very cautious there, because if you bring the cost savings down anymore, quality is going to be affected. And that's something you can't risk as you're trying to get people to feel comfortable to walk back into locations. But from my seat, why I feel excited is that we are now looked at as almost as a consultant to the decision makers at retails, banks, restaurants across the United States and Canada, because they're saying, Rob, what can you do for us? What type of proactive programs can you put in front of us? And that's just on the repair side. Let's now talk for a minute about capital, right? You're going to see a whole new approach to store reconfigurations. I'm sure Tom's seen it from the parking lot reconfigurations, right, with spots for pickup. But a lot of customers are talking about adding additional self-checkouts, which is certainly going to be a cost. Touchless fixtures from the second you walk into location all the way to the restrooms, which are very important. Those things are going to happen, and they're going to happen rapidly. So it's important for the retailers to have good partners who can have access to a large portion of those parts to roll those out very quickly. So obviously a lot of work cut out for all of us. Again, if the retailer wasn't doing well before the pandemic, they're going to have a much more difficult time, and we've seen the bankruptcies come out. But those that were smart and kind of thrived the last few years, we're seeing them take the right approach to get ready for 2021 and take those steps to continue to get that space to look post-COVID, if you will.
Yeah. And you hit on one thing that I wanted to ask Tom. And again, I don't want to get caught up in some of the negative predictions looking beyond the next few years, but there's reports that 100,000 stores will potentially close over the next 5 years. 20% of U.S. malls out of 1,000, and again, even if you shrink those numbers, they're not encouraging. But of course, you speak to some folks and they say, I'm optimistic and I'm excited about the future of retail. I don't know how many people in our audience were going to say that they're truly excited about those numbers, but there, of course, are opportunities to do things differently and do things smarter. What is ICSC's, I guess, outlook now for, if we're talking beyond this next year or two? I think you disagree with the statement that, the U.S. is overstored. I think you said that earlier. So what is your overall thought?
Yeah, I don't know that I have an opinion on that particular point of view. I would say that I think it's important not to get too caught up in what we're experiencing now, because what we're experiencing now, and try to reflect that over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, what we're experiencing now is let's hope, a once in a lifetime event and crisis. And so we are seeing an acceleration of a whole lot of stuff happen within a short period of time. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important not to reflect what we're seeing right now and say, well, project that over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. Some things are going to stay. The trends, the acceleration of the trends around, the omni-channel environment. And as I say, there's really not a physical channel and a digital channel. There's only one channel that matters, and it's the customer channel. And it's whatever best way you have to serve your customer. I think the industry as a whole, the retail industry and physical retail, has been around for centuries, and has gone through a lot and has always recreated itself. And I do believe that will happen. Will some retailers go away? Yes, that's happened over history many times, and new ones will emerge, and new tenants will emerge, and properties and centers will look different. But again, I don't want to project what's happening right now over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. The one thing I do think is very positive for the industry, outside of some of the liquidity opportunities that exist once we get past the pandemic, is just the demographic changes that are taking place. And I think the move to the suburbs is really a reflection, an acceleration of a trend that was already happening, where you saw the millennial generation was beginning to move out to the suburbs. It's been accelerated because of the pandemic. And what are they moving to the suburbs for? Well, they're moving to the suburbs, generally speaking, because they've gotten married and they have kids, and they're looking for more space and schools, et cetera, and they're buying homes. And why is that important? Because those 3 life events, and we have this enormous millennial generation, the largest generation in U.S. history, entering into those major life events right now. All 3 of those life events drives consumer demand. And so, again, when you get out of the mind frame of the pandemic, which is hard to do right now, but when we get beyond this pandemic and you look at the demographics as they exist within the U.S. and a huge millennial population that's entering into their prime consumption years, that's a huge positive for retail. And so I think we'll need to see how that plays out, and then we'll be in a better position to opine upon, what's the right store balance, et cetera. We also have to understand that, centers nowadays, shopping centers, retail centers, consumer centers, when we think of retail, that definition of retail is a lot different than it was 10, 15 years ago. It's really a much more diversified set of tenants. It's not just a classic retail. It's obviously entertainment, food and beverage. Been challenged in the pandemic, but I think they'll come back. And also services and healthcare. And while we have a growing millennials that are entering into their prime consumption years, we have an aging baby boomer population that has a high demand for healthcare, and they want that healthcare close to where they live, and that generally is suburban, real estate. So,
what do you? And just to follow up on that, just briefly, your thoughts just on urban retail, right? New York City is taking quite a hit now, and other major cities, where a lot of retailers are leaving.
Just like I think, I think that I think it's important not to project what's happening right now and say that's what the New York City's going to be suffering 5 or 10 years from now. Look, New York City has gone through many recreations over its history, as have many major cities in this country. And I believe in the cities of this country. I believe people like to congregate in cities, and you have while you have a millennial population that might increasingly move to the suburbs, a lot more baby boomers are going to want to move to the cities because they're empty nesters. And you have a Gen X generation that's huge as well that are going to be interested in living in cities. And cities figure out a way to recreate because we're social beings. They always have. And I wouldn't bet against New York City or Philadelphia or Los Angeles or Washington, D.C. or major cities across this country, because they have recreated themselves many times over, and they will again.
Oh, I'm a native New Yorker, so I agree with that 100%. So I want to, again, bring it back, and I encourage everybody, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to throw in, of course, I encourage you to do that. I'm checking it on the phone right now. But I want to, thinking again of the audience, taking it back to the cost, the challenge, because again, that was the number one thing that heads of store development, construction, facilities that we have in here. It's that balance of cutting costs, but making sure you're still delivering the customer experience safe. And Rob, you hit on that before, but for organizations that are struggling right now, where do you suggest they start looking? If that's kind of the directive, is to, find that balance. We have some that are, saying that they're exploring outsourcing for the first time. I'd love just to kind of get some insights and, some of the tools and technologies that are out there now to help better manage as well.
Well, just as we said that some of the retailers aren't going to get out of this, some suppliers aren't as well. Early after the pandemic started, I reached out to a lot of my friendly competitors to, one, make sure they're doing well, but two, just to see, what they're hearing, what they're seeing. And unfortunately, some didn't make it, and some are thriving, right? Because they were able to weather the storm. Again, what we do is necessary for the brand to exist. Consolidation of providers is something I would recommend. I know it's not necessarily everyone's favorite thing to consider, but obviously consolidation provides volume, and volume provides discounts. Again, the thing you have to be cautious of is how much of a discount you're being offered. We all know that when too much of a cost savings comes in, then again, the quality begins to suffer. It's a very fine line we've got to walk here. Now, I think if you've done a nice job building good partnerships with your suppliers, you may want to just even consider not calling them vendors, but call them partners, because that's what we are now, right? Over the last, call it 6 months, I've had more discussions with key decision makers at our retail brand clients that I've never thought I'd had before, because they needed to hear what we were thinking, and they wanted us to really act as an extension of their team. You made a great point earlier. Some of the staff that we had built great relationships with over 20 years, gone, furloughed, and not returning. We want to make sure that we are that extension that they couldn't replace as they get out of this. And I think it's not just a one-time hit here, right? You've got to be innovative. You've got to pivot every single week, because, again, you just don't know what's going to happen next. Think about the unrest we've had throughout the country a few different times throughout the year. Every time foot traffic began to pick up, we were being called to do the board ups. And it wasn't just from that. It was also the amount of hurricanes that our clients saw, in the Gulf Coast. It did not stop. It hasn't stopped, and it will not stop until, who knows, right? Again, we can't predict the future. I think that's why, more importantly than ever, no matter who you're using for whatever services, whether it's capital, store design, facilities, etc., your partners, your suppliers need to make sure they're providing you with real-time financials and analytics at your fingertips. You have to be well known about what you're spending at every given moment, because you just don't have the checkbook that you had back in February, and you're certainly not going to have it come January as we get out of this holiday season.
Yeah, I love all those comments you just mentioned, because I guess, as you know, we, in our normal world, we do live events and we bring the retail community together with the supplier community. And we know that it's tough even for the suppliers right now to get out and have conversations with retailers. We're all trying to figure out this virtual world that we're stuck in. So that's a nice way to kind of pivot onto just another theme is, how have, you all been managing? And Tom, I'm of course curious to hear from you, because I know that you have your events, and I saw that Recon now is not until December of next year. You'll be happy to hear we ran a roundtable a few weeks ago where an exec from Staples on the real estate side said it's really tough for him to think about deals moving forward, because he looks to Recon every year. But of course, everybody's trying to pivot and figure out how to, find partners and do that. But from a facility standpoint and kind of managing projects and the uncertainty, there's obviously the upside here is that it's a lot easier to communicate and get on and have these conversations. I'm just curious, Tom, I guess selfishly, just curious to get your thoughts on the future of kind of virtual meetings and coming together, and how to, maintain proper communication.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm zoomed out. So I'll be the first to admit I'm zoomed out. So I think technology has played an important role throughout all of this, obviously, and it's kept the economy going and allowed us to continue to interact and et cetera. But it is not a replacement for human interaction. And I think the first couple of months, there was a certain efficiency. Well, first of all, we were living in the eye of the storm, and everything was so intense and moving so quickly, and we were happy to have the ability to interact in any way that we could. But that focus upon efficiency, I think, has we've moved on from that, and we're all, I think, desiring a chance to get back together again as colleagues, whether that's with work colleagues within our companies or more broadly at big events like what you're you guys throw or what we throw at Recon and other and other events. And so there will be a place for virtual events going forward because they've been introduced. But I do believe once it's safe and people feel confident, and just like they need to feel confident to go into a store, and safety and security needs to be front and center, and the comments that Rob made I think are right on. They'll need to feel that same level of confidence to go back to live events, but I think they will eventually because people desire to be together and interact. And clearly in retail in particular, and retail real estate, it's very much a relationship business. It's very much about having a relationship and feel confident with the people that you're doing business with, and who you're leasing space to and leasing space from, et cetera. So I'm confident that when we get back to a sense of normalcy, that those live events will be robust and successful again. But in the short term, our primary focus has always been how do we deliver value for our members and our constituencies and our stakeholders, but how do we do it safely? And right now that's virtual. And as soon as the pandemic eases and it is safe to bring people together live, we'll do that, because I think there'll be a demand for that. And I know our members are missing that, and we miss having them and hosting them too. But right now we're using virtual because we have to.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up to that, though. Do you envision that the virtual components will stick around and be something that's a central part of a Recon once we get through the pandemic? And this is a crystal ball question. I know you don't have a definitive answer. I'm just curious to know.
I think we'll use technology. I don't know that virtual will be. I don't know if there will be a virtual component to Recon or not. I think we'll be driven by what people want. You got to react to the market. But I would say that there will be an enhanced use of technology throughout events. Period. Whether that's lead up through some type of virtual component or the use of virtual at an event. I don't know. I mean, I think the primary purpose of Recon, quite frankly, is still to bring people together under one roof in one place, and the efficiency that our members value, and having everyone together and seeing them live. And that will always be what we lean into more than, having a digital component to the event. I'm sure there will be, but that won't be our primacy. Our primacy will be bringing people together, which is what they value most.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And I think obviously our audience will be interesting to hear that, because I think everyone's itching to get back to live events. But I wanted to throw it to Matt on that same topic. It's on the theme of what do you think is going to be the lasting effects of certain of the pandemic? So is there anything that from a consumer perspective, as well as economically, do you see anything that's shifted now as a result of the pandemic that you think could have some long-term impacts, or even, longer beyond the next year or two?
Well, I mean, obviously I don't know for sure. I think that some of the themes that were hit on earlier will likely play forward. This has challenged everyone. And I was just listening to Tom and Rob speak, and so much of what they're talking about applies to financial services or banking. A lot of the same questions, a lot of the same problems or unknowns exist. So everyone's stepping back and needs to rethink this. We're rethinking our physical distribution and our retail locations. This has also, I think, challenged us to think how we get stuff done faster and cheaper than historically. There's great to have strategies on a sheet of paper, but how you put them out into the real world really matters. And so, what we did and many did back in March and April, we moved faster and quicker than certainly we would have ever imagined, because you ultimately had to. So I do think there's lessons to be taken away. How long this lasts will be an interesting development in terms of what really sticks and what doesn't. But this has certainly accelerated trends that were already there by 2, 3, 4, 5x. And so will they come back or won't they? I'm not sure. To give you a maybe real life example, more to banking than retail space, is when our stores were closed, the vast majority of customers opened their accounts online because there was really no other way than bank by appointment. Now that our stores are more back to being full access, what we're seeing is a shift back towards the stores, but some of the digital sales that were there have stayed. And so what's permanent versus temporary, I think time will tell. But back to some of the questions on expenses, one of the ways that it's certainly that we like to orient, or I like to orient the conversation, is that there are expenses and efficiencies to be driven out. But I also think looking at those in terms of how you engage customers to drive top line revenue is the best way to actually get expenses out versus just cutting expenses to cut expenses.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Rob, I guess I want to throw it back to you on that too, in terms of, where do you see from a customer's perspective, some shifts that you think are going to stick around? I mean, I think with everything now, everything's been digitized, right? People realizing, wow, we shouldn't be operating on spreadsheets anymore. And it's scary to think that some people were, but now everything, kind of communication wise and everything. So do you see any long-term impacts now that we've been accelerated into the future?
I do. I mean, I have 2 children, 6 and 9 years old. Every day I have to fill out an app to make sure I answer the questions the right way. Otherwise, they are not allowed at school. And I support it. Look, I was the first one to go to work every year in flu season when I didn't feel good because I didn't want to come out sick. Now I can log on and do this with a sore throat. And I think those kinds of things are important for us to carry forward with. You shouldn't walk into a location if you've got a high temperature, whatever the case might be. I flew for the first time in 8 months, 2 weeks ago. I never felt more safe on an airplane. It smelled like a bottle of bleach. I can tell you, so the level of customer service has gone up. People that want to go back to work, they're eager to please the client because they know the more that they can do that, the more people are going to continue to fly. The hotel we stayed at, they took all the right precautions. It was a big step for my family and I, but we knew we had to do it just to see what it was like, and thrilled with the entire experience from start to finish. And that's flying out of Philadelphia, which if you know anything about airports, that's not one of my favorite ones. And again, I think the retailers are, again, I'll repeat it because it's so important to put the message out there, because there are people that are still afraid of this virus, and I completely respect that. And it's great that we've come up with these alternative ways for them to still have an experience. But those that feel comfortable have to know that everything from sanitation to, the social distancing, the reconfiguration, the signage, that wasn't done as a marketing plug. That was done because the Retail Association cares about the consumer. And I think you're going to see more of that kind of awareness, is not just the next 3 months, but permanently, which quite frankly was a wake-up call for us. I think we all had to kind of make sure we did the right things to give the consumer the right environment to walk in. And I think it's just a year from now, 2 years from now, who knows where we'll be, but just think of the additional innovation we're going to have. And we talked about trade shows. Look, I would love to be out in Vegas in May at Recon. We know that's not possible, but I think we're all in a position where we're working together. This is a perfect example. There's 100 or so people behind the scenes listening. Let's collaborate. Let's network. Let's talk about best practices. Again, while we might compete in some verticals, we're all here for one mission. Let's get back to some kind of normal. And I think with the right approach, we're going to get there sooner or later with a lot of technology advances as well.
Amen to that. I love everything you just said there. And I have one more question though for you, Rob, because we didn't really hit on construction and project management, because we do have a number of people that have a lot of that responsibility in our audience. Any specific things that you're seeing? Because there's, again, a lot of uncertainty. A lot of projects were stopped and and started up again as a result of outbreaks, material costs, labor challenges. Any insights? Because I know that you guys have a lot of that specifically with the work that you guys do on looking ahead to the next year and how to keep projects moving forward in an era of still some uncertainty.
Yeah, we've seen our customers with the capital spend wanting to spend it before the end of the year. We know how that works, so that's reassuring. And they're building the budgets for next year, so they're planning on getting it. I think supply chains, right? Everybody's going to want that next part or fixture that makes the consumer feel safe. So how do you get your hands on that? And when you need it for the amount of sites that are out there, we know that's going to be a challenge. But just like when we kind of ran into that issue early in the pandemic with the PPE, we'll get there. Again, if you think about construction, it may not necessarily be the remodel that they had in mind, but I can assure you, wider aisles. Again, I've talked to multiple clients. We're doing some work for some right now. More self-checkout. Don't remove the staff. Put them in the back of the store to continue to replenish. Right. So it's more distribution center feel, which I think is great because the curbside pickup is not going away. It's super convenient. And then I think the other part for those that really do have the dollars is to innovate and make the retail experience just that, an experience. We've got a client that maybe 4 or 5 years ago built a 60,000 square foot location in the meatpacking district. It did not sell one product. You could touch it, you could feel it, you could do all you want with everything they have, but you couldn't buy it there. People want to be driven into a location. They want to be able to have fun. And I think we're going to see more of that, especially with the more thriving retailers, which I believe it was Tom who said those millennials, they want to get out, they want to have fun. And I think we'll see that there. But yeah, it's going to happen. It's just going to be a lot different than, hey, we're going to remodel these 50 locations, give us a bid. I think we're going to have to really look closely at supply chain for parts and materials. We're going to have to look at just innovating that retail space. And again, going back to those partners I talked about, you've got to be prepared to get those calls from your retailer saying, listen, we're going to give you this work, but payment terms aren't going to be what they were in the past. Can you float that? And I think those that kind of prepared for that over the last 3 years will deliver well beyond their expectations. And a final thought, and something that Ness is taking a serious look at, the average field tech out there, depending on the trade, is somewhere in the mid-50s. Folks aren't necessarily driving to go to trade school out of high school. And we're saying enough of that. We believe the trades are very reputable, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's HVAC, plumbing, janitorial, landscaping. I mean, no matter what pandemic we're in, the grass is going to need to be cut, the store is going to need to be cleaned, and the HVAC unit is going to be need to be maintained. So we are internally working on some initiatives to kind of promote the importance of trade schools. And I think they have a huge opportunity to thrive, not just for retail, but for the consumer in general, as those things are going to be necessary for decades and eras to come.
Thanks so much. And I'm just going to some of the questions here that I just want to throw. So this is from Teresa English. Are you seeing increasing trends to fill retail vacancies with a variety of entertainment options to maintain high foot traffic to support? I guess, of course, that question is for Tom. And of course, we know that was a big trend, moving prior to the pandemic. But do you see a lot more entertainment options as a future, within shopping centers and malls? Is that trend to continue to grow?
I do in the future. I mean, obviously, right now, I think that's not a trend that you're seeing take place for obvious reasons. But I do think going forward, post-pandemic, I do think that people are social beings. People look at how many folks are going out to eat in outdoor dining right now, sitting in a parking lot, sitting outside. And, I went out to eat this weekend, and it was, in the mid 30s, and we were sitting, under a tent with heaters outside because people want to be outside. So people want to socialize and go out to eat, those types of things. So I do think that trend will continue. I don't think it goes away, but I think it's been paused because of the obvious impact of the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, we just had the CEO of American Dream on our Retail Spaces Almost Live, and I saw some promising numbers, at least, coming out of there when they reopened. So hopefully we'll see that continue to grow. We're coming up on time. So if anybody has, some questions, of course, they want to throw in there, we can get to that. And we do have one or two more in here. But to wrap things up, the session is planning your retail operations, planning retail for 2021 and beyond. We hit on a number of themes here, but as we look to the future, and I say the future, the next 5-10 years, I'll start with you, Tom, again. What do you see as the biggest opportunities? And thinking again of our audience, if these are heads of store development, design, for retail, physical retail. I know that's a loaded question, but.
Well, I think that one, as I said, I am over a 5-year period for demographic reasons and et cetera. I am, optimistic about the industry. I think the impact of the pandemic and the trends that we've seen accelerated, and new ones that have been emphasized, like an emphasis upon, safety and making safety very clear and observant when you walk into a store. I mean, there's directional signs. It's clean. There's sanitary. There's a place to wash your hands or get sanitized wipes. All those types of things, I don't think they're going to go away. I mean, I think those continue for sure. So I think that as it relates to this audience, I think that that trend continues for sure. And I think Rob's point around wider, aisles, et cetera, as people build stores in the future, I think will continue as well. And then I think, the utilization of space outside of the store, parking lots, et cetera, will continue to be, not just because of curbside pickup, but lots of things still to come. Will continue to be, a trend to think about it. And inside the store, the one other thing I would say is because of the, I think stores have become not just a store where people go to shop, it's also a place where people come to fulfill an order now. So the layout of the store and how much of the store space is used to fulfill an order, a pickup of an order that might have been originated online, will influence the way the store is laid out as well. And and it may not look exactly the same 5 years from now for at least some sectors of the retail space versus how it looks today.
Thank you, Tom. Now, Matt, obviously you're not a retailer, but
No.
just some closing up here. Well, actually, you are, because we had TD speak about actually our retail space is almost live recently to talk about changes to space. And maybe even adding more drive-throughs in the future. But just kind of overall, I mean, again, just to reiterate things we talked about earlier, you're obviously optimistic just overall about consumer confidence and everything over the next 5+ years.
Yeah, I mean, if I got any more pessimistic, it'd be hard to wake up every day. This is painful enough. So,
Well, yeah.
I'm optimistic just out of necessity to get out of bed. So that's one reason. I think too, I guess to your question to Tom, there's two themes I'd leave the group with. Whether it's useful or not, I'm not sure. One thing that we've seen for sure is loyalty really matters. And it was said earlier, think about the experience you're creating for customers. I couldn't agree with that more. We've really seen loyalty mattering in this time, and specific retailers. It's been a disproportionate amount of their business has been from what they consider or we consider loyal customers. So that's one thing I think through. And then the other thing is just the way this is a little bit more of a banking spin on your question, but I just think through the way people pay for things. We were seeing way less credit card usage than debit. Debit's been way up. But things like contactless, touchless was talked about earlier. But what's the play for mobile wallets and point of sale financing or installment loans is getting a ton of increase. It's been out there, but more and more players are entering it. So those would be maybe not true retail operations, the spirit of your questions, but those are two things that we're certainly paying attention to in our business, but also with some of our business partners. Yeah,
no, that's definitely very insightful. And Rob, just any closing words from you? Just curious to know, where do you see the real opportunities, for retailers to get ahead, right now? Because there's people that are just waiting for things to get back to status quo, and we know that if you do that and not planning ahead and changing and leaning into innovative thinking, you have to do things differently. So what would you be, your closing thoughts to the audience?
Yeah, I think marketing's got to be a key player there to, get the consumer to see what they're doing and get them to feel good about going back into the site. I can tell you from my seat, again, we've been remote since the middle of March, and who knows when we'll be back into the physical office. But just think about that for a second. The employee that used to work, 9 to 5 in the office Monday through Friday, now can, clock out for a minute and head over to the local shopping center and pick something up. So I think foot traffic's going to be looked at differently. Again, if anything, though, the retailer specifically, you have to drive people back into that location. That it's all about experience, not to sound like a broken record, but get people to want to come in for some reason. And once you've got them in the door, if they can see that you've taken care of that facility from a sanitation perspective, from a safety perspective, they'll continue to come back. Day by day, this will get better. It's just about how you promote that consumer confidence. And just to reiterate one more time, I can assure you the retailers are doing all they can to make sure it's a good place to walk into.
Excellent. Well, we're right up on the top of the hour here, so I want to thank you guys for joining for this discussion today. It's a tough one, right? Because there is so much uncertainty, and it's tough to kind of really figure things out. But thank you so much for taking time to share your insights. And I want to thank Nest, Rob, your organization, for being a sponsor of Retail Spaces over the years. Thanks for continuing to support what we do virtually, and hopefully we'll get back to those live events. But for those that are not familiar with Nest, they're the leader, the pioneer in integrated facilities management, and do a number of other things. And you can go to enternest.com for more information about Nest, to learn about how they can help you make better decisions with facilities as well as construction and real estate. They've got a whole suite of products and solutions. So thank you again for joining. Thank you to the audience for taking time, either of your morning or your afternoon, to be with us here today. And we'll, of course, do a little write-up and summary of this to put up on the blog as well in the coming weeks. So thank you guys so much. Great. And be safe and have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you as well.
Everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Take care.
I've got an address that's